In ancient Assyria, Ptolemy mentions two capitals, Nineveh and Sarben, though these are Nineveh and Assur. Arbela, in fact, is Sarbela, from whose name the initial letter Sima was removed. In my opinion, Sarbenda and Sarbena are ancient Assyrian cities, and Sarbela got that name, if it was not called that earlier, from the time of Alexander the Great. Near that city was the last great battle and the final victory over Persia, so as part of that victory, Alexander could give the city the name Sarbela. The mention of the country Seriadik near Maneto, as we have already mentioned, also refers to Assyria. The inscription of the statue of the high priest Gude from Sirbul is again Assyrian. Rosenmiller says that real Assyria was east of Digla River, Tigris, and that it was from there expanded by conquering part of Aram or Syria between Greater and Lesser Serba. Regarding the name Sardanapal, Charles Rollin says that the name was composed according to the custom of the eastern people and consists of Sardanpul, which means Sardanpul's son, because his father's name was Pul, and he is mentioned by Jonah in the Old Testament. All historians agree that the founding of the Second Empire in the 14th century BC was in fact founding of Assyria. In the second half of the 14th century BC, major historical events have taken place, traces of which lead us from Balkan Serbia to India. At that time, the great and mighty sixth Troy was destroyed. Some archaeologists think it was destroyed by an earthquake. After that destruction, a new ruling house of Serbian origin, the Dardanians from Pomoravlje, appear in Troy. In Strabon's explanation, Joslin says that Heracles conquered Troy in 1030 BC. Zachary Mayani points out that it was around 1300 BC. Partial settlement of Troy, Ionia, Lydia, Phrygia, Caria, and Lyca, with Illyrians and Thracians from the Helm Peninsula. The Helm Dardanians, who spoke an Illyrian dialect, settled in Troy. At that time, the fall of Crete and then powerful kingdom on Pelag and the end of Minoan dynasty took place. At the same time, there was a great attack of the so-called maritime people on Egypt. The main role among the attackers is played by warriors who are called Serbs, Serdans, by Egyptian records from that time. Their attacks on Egypt will be renewed from time to time throughout the next century. Kljakic has information that the Pelasgian settlement of the Middle East was recorded in 14th century BC in territory that will be named Palestine after them. The kingdom of Nino, that is, the first kingdom, was in disrepair and powerlessness. Exactly in the second half of the 14th century BC, there was the second great invasion of Aryans in India, which arrived in the same direction as the first, but with the difference that was the first invasion lasted in 5 rivers, northwestern India, and the second invasion went through the whole valley of the river Indus all the way to the sea. Alexander the Great finds Serbs from second invasion on the middle and lower reaches of the Indus River. The names of the mountains and rivers, which are in direct connection with the Serbian name, are also found in the lower course of Indus River and factually prove that the second campaign went all the way to the mouth. And finally, we have information from Eusebius that in 1025 BC, Bak fought with Hindus and founded the city of Nisa on the Indus River. Eusebius here identifies, if it is not someone's modification, Serbon and Bak. The stated name for those events in India differs from exactly 5 years from the aforementioned Sermon's conquest of Troy, which proves to be quite reasonable. The identification of Bak and Serbon is partially found in Holy Scriptures. Nebrod as a phenomenon embodies as many Serbs as Bak. Eusebius also informs us that Mita began his reign in Phrygia around 1030-10 BC. Only a few years later, Ilo or Ilia built his city Ilion. It was a seventh Troy, which was destroyed in 1184 BC in the famous Trojan War sung in Iliad. Exactly at appointed time with Eusebius, great changes are taking place in Assyria. Vardun, Babylon, is no longer the capital, but the city of Assur takes over this role, as mentioned by the eastern people as Sarbena. Salmanasar I ruled just before 1300 BC and founded a city of Kalach. The Bible says that this city, among others, was founded by Assur. This means that Assur of Izorod is Salmanasar in cuneiform. Salmanasar is the Sarban emperor or Serbon emperor. At Eusebius, Sosares, this name had some changes as every foreign name which comes across the Greek language. It must be mentioned that the writings on cuneiform was mostly on the language of the people which Serbs found in Mesopotamia, and from there many differences in names of Assyrian emperors. Salmanasar and Sosares are descendants of the changed name of Serbon. The natives used mostly Aramaic, but not all and not always. In the Middle East there was a great mixture of people, as Barrows testifies to us, and their languages were different. The Serbian names of the Assyrian emperors came to us through Greek language and regularly underwent minor and major changes. Ragozin tells us that in a time of around 1300 BC, significant dates in the history of Assyria occurred when the first conquest of Babylon by an Assyrian emperor took place. The city of Serbon, dedicated to Nino, Nineveh, was then the largest city in the world. In fact, no one has ever founded such a large city in ancient times. Nineveh had a quadrangular rampart, the longer side of which had 150 stadiums and the shorter side 19 stadiums. One stadium of this type had 177.46 meters. The total length of the ramparts was 85 kilometers, while Vardun had a rampart length of about 65 kilometers. The rampart was 100 feet high and so wide that the 3 carts could be parallelly ride on it. The ramparts of Nineveh had 1,500 towers, 200 feet high. Diodorus says that the name of the city was Nino. The same writer tells us that Nino was presented in Vardun as he is piercing the lion with Sarissa. That was more characteristic of Serbon than Nino. When the Assyrian writings were discovered and their reading and interpretation was in full swing, an interesting case occurred. The excavation and reading of the cuneiform tablets was done by a group of people made up of Germans, English, and Phrygians. There was complete agreement among these people, and they were all like-minded, which cannot pass without being noticed. Everyone agreed that all Assyrian writings were in one Semitic language. Professor Filoseno Lucato from Padua intervened in their reading. He published a book complaining about the difficulties in publishing it. It is enough to assume that Assyrian natives who conquered and all that this conquest placed about them another race, which was not Semitic but Indo-European. the Hindu brothers, and Persians. It was quite possible that the lords of Assyria knew the language of the people they conquered, and that there were in Assyria two languages, in the same way as there were two people, one of which was Semitic or Aramaic and other Sanskrit or Assyrian. All Assyrian writings, from those from Persepolis, like those from Horsabad, Nimrud, and Van, they are written in a language very closely connected to the Zend and with the oldest Sanskrit dialect, that one of the Vedas. It was in this language that I was able to read almost all Assyrian Persepolis records, all records from Van, and some parts of the records from Horsabad. Then someone silenced Professor Lucato and was never heard of again. The Book of Assyrian Records says, by the way, that his method does not lead to a goal. They did not say for what goal. Barrows says, there are from the beginning in Babylon many people of foreign race living in Chaldea and living without law like beasts.